He pulls the map away from me and he says, what is this thing? And I said, well, this is the asset map. It's how I organize everything going on. He says, do me a favor. Don't ever bring all that stuff again. Like, I don't want to see that. I want a 1-page summary of what all that stuff says. And I want this map.
Well, I am super excited today to have the pleasure of having Adam Holt, the CEO and founder of Asset Map, on the show today. Welcome to the show, Adam. It's a pleasure to have you.
Great to see you, Larry, in the digital flesh.
Yes. Well, we got to see each other in real life
Mhm.
a few weeks ago at the Shift conference, which was amazing, and I appreciated the time spent. And I'm so looking forward to our time here digitally today. So.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Uh,
Thanks, Larry.
So thank you for joining us. So listen, I want to spend a fair amount of time on Asset Map, but I'm always really intrigued by the entrepreneurial journey. I think they're so different, never a straight line. So can you share with our listeners a little bit about Adam Holt, what brought you to founding up to the point of founding Asset Map and kind of your entrepreneurial journey to that point?
No, certainly, and you'll relate to this. I think I'm a glutton for punishment. I think in the sense that taking on a project that has no boundaries and no real clear future, and putting your entire life's net worth behind it as well as your family's is an interesting idea in entrepreneurship. But it didn't start out with that decision. I was like you. I call myself a recovering financial planner at 25 years as a CFP, built a practice in Philadelphia around the same tenets that helped many of us get to where we are, and did asset management, financial planning, did estate planning, and all kinds of corporate benefits over the years, and grew that firm to about 25 total people. And the success of it really came around this concept that I was playing with for many years. Actually, believe it or not, just someone asked when the asset map started. The original submissions to the trademark office were in 2002, which is unbelievable to me now that in 2024. Because my hope was to try to explain the complexity of people's lives visually, because that's how I understood it. And I think in the early years of my life, I always imagined myself becoming an architect. So lo and behold, I became a financial planner, which, as we both know, is a financial architect. So I think
Right.
it's interesting how it's evolved out of my own practice.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's interesting because you say you had this art background, right?
Mhm.
So, how did that end up translating? You said that was really the impetus. You felt really comfortable explaining to the families you worked with kind of their financial lives with
Mhm.
this picture. So, how did that art background? What does that mean? How did that end up translating to helping those families and then the eventual creation of Asset Map?
Well, it's funny. I think that my comfort with visual representation, whether it was digital art or literally pen and pencil drawings, or now I'm into pottery and sculpture, I've always found some kind of outlet for it. I very felt comfortable getting in front of a screen or an audience or a blackboard or whiteboard and basically drawing out what I understood to be the relationship. And that precision and clarity and not a big mess, I think, was appreciated by a lot of people who are looking to try to understand the current condition they were living in. As we work with families that have higher net worth and complexity, it gets really messy, and it's trying to help people understand their current condition in context to what they've already done is much more challenging than a balance sheet ever gives it any kind of credit, or looking at a policy summary and people saying, well, I just see a bunch of numbers. What does it mean for me? It turns out that a lot of the financial decisions that we all make, unfortunately, are generally haphazard. Either our employer gave us some stuff we don't understand, or we inherited it, or I opened up an account and it hasn't changed in years, or my cousin sold me something because I trusted them. We wind up accumulating this big bunch of stuff, and we don't really inspect it, looking at all of it together. We look at them in individual boxes. So I think for me, I had a hard time really understanding, Larry, what was going on and why these things exist. It turns out that's because so much of this stuff we accumulate over our lifetime. The average household has 25 different financial instruments, and they're not there intentionally. They're generally haphazard. So I found for me, the benefit was I could now visually understand the relationship between all the people, the trusts, the instruments, the incomes, and now I could actually question and challenge why they exist. So structure tended to be more important, and that required visualization.
So it really is the old adage, right? A picture is worth a thousand words. That's really what Asset Map is
Mhm.
doing, is putting those words, or those accounts in this case, into a visualization of how this is all serving the people that have accumulated these assets, more or less.
No, absolutely. And in fact, the benefit of the visualization is not the visualization in and of itself. I'm sure there's a treasure map component of this, Larry, which is okay, now we can all agree that this is the current inventory. Now, does it serve us? And
Right.
that's the ultimate question is we've been talking obviously a lot about AI and artificial intelligence and how that's coming into and disrupting every single industry. But I've been joking recently, and I think it's true the more I say it, is that the original AI is advisor intelligence. So we hired a professional to give us some context with their experience, their credibility, their access to resources to say, hey, does this make sense? And what I'm doing today, does it actually serve me, help me, lift me, or what I care about? And it turns out that the utilization of the map enabled that conversation because we could look at it in context to each other. Like I see you have kids and you have some trusts and you clearly are thinking about legacy. Why are these insurance policies not in trust? Or have you thought about moving? No, I don't know. No one knows. So wait, these guys didn't talk to these guys. No, this is all organized wrong. So it's
Mhm.
not going to play out the way you want. And that it turned
Right.
out we uncover that much more easily when we can see it.
Amazing. Amazing. So what, at what point did what was the eureka moment for you in terms of, you were using this kind of internally
Yeah.
for you and your stakeholders, your families.
Mhm.
At what point do you say, "Hey, wait, I have something here. This is something that could really revolutionize the profession, and not only help me and the families we're working with, but really the profession and advisors as a whole, and all of those families that they serve could really be helped by this."
So if you asked me back in 2006 and 7, so I institutionalized this in my firm in 2006 because of a single moment. I went to a meeting. We were making these bespoke visualizations by hand using computer software, but we were making them for every single family for myself internally. I'd go to my meetings. I'd have my map, which helped me understand the whole thing, and then I'd have my e-money report, and I'd have my Morning Star, and then there's a huge pile of paper because we would print them. And you would look really intelligent. Okay, here's all the research I did, and my clients would see me taking notes on the map. Like, okay, we got to move this, we got to get rid of this, let's replace this, let's reallocate this. And I went to this meeting in Virginia, and the husband was there, wife didn't show up. He pulls the map away from me and he says, what is this thing?" And I said, "Well, this is the asset map. It's how I organize everything going on." Like, he says, "Do me a favor. Don't ever bring all that stuff again. Like, I don't want to see that. I want a one-page summary of what all that stuff says, and I want this map. And let's talk about intentionality." Because he was an executive, right? So he thought in
Mhm.
terms of allocation of resources and intentionality. And I was like, okay, so you want this too? He's like, yeah. He's like, and I want a clean copy after this meeting when you update it because my wife doesn't know what's going on. She's always complaining that I'm giving her all your darn reports and she doesn't know where to start. So I said, oh, so she wants it too. He's like, yes, this will save my marriage. I said, okay. So I got a compliance approved, and that took some time, right? In 2006, I actually tripled my revenue year over year until 2009 when I said, okay, this thing has legs. And that's when I invested in building the first tool. But it wasn't in 2012 when I showed it at a conference, Larry. I said, this is what I'm doing. And 20 of the top advisors in my firm said, can I use that? And I said, all right, sure. I guess I'll find a way to get it to you. And those were our first 20 subscribers, if you will. Now we're thousands and thousands, and we're pushing almost 2 million people in Asset Map. So it's validated it because the people who had the problem, us financial advisors, we need to communicate better. And it really has evolved because we're just trying to solve the problem of communication.
Right. And you said that this really was an impetus to helping you grow exponentially with
Absolutely.
regard to the practice.
Mhm.
I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it sounds like because you were able to simplify this for other people there, if they had other assets or had other relationships,
Yeah.
it was an easy conversation for them to have that with those people and say, "Hey, this is what my person is doing. Is your person doing this?" Right?
There's two components of it. I think you hit the nail on the head. One is our clients are coming to us for certainty. right? They're making decisions that they could make on their own, but they're saying, I need some guidance. I don't know if I know exactly what to ask, right? We have legal, tax, insurance, investment implications to making decisions. Clients are not necessarily versed in all of these different areas, which
Mhm.
hopefully we are as financial professionals. So the first thing is when you can give back to somebody that I listen to you visually, and here's what your life looks like. It's like literally going in their closet and saying, I know in your head, if I asked you how many sweaters you have, you'd be like, I have like 5 or 6 sweaters. I got some shirts. Do they fit? I don't know. I haven't tried them on. Should I make some room? So the cleaning of the closet inventory analogy, I think, is really helpful because most people need to get their inventory in order before we can figure out whether they're going to make it to their goals. Right? They're missing pieces. They need to add these pieces. Some things are great. Some things are they're horrible, or they're too costly, or they're not tax efficient. And so we need to kind of fix the car before we can get on the journey. And I think that process is really important. And unfortunately, I think for so many of us, we tend to lead with the technical analysis. Let's look at the portfolio and see if the allocation is right or the fees are right. And that's just like looking at the engine of the car without asking, do we have seatbelts? And well, for us, we actually did this. When you help people look at the bigger picture, you get permission to inspect the whole car, not just the engine. And we would find all kinds of issues, whether it was tax or insurance. We built a massive insurance practice just by solving the problem that other advisors weren't even paying attention to. So, in a sense, I think there are many more needs that can get uncovered when we have permission to look at the whole closet, not just the sweaters or not just the slacks or the shoes. All right. So, whatever analogy you want to use, I think that's an important aspect.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And then, you mentioned these 20, your first 20
Yeah,
subscribers, right? Did they also see similar, expansive growth in their practices as a result of it too?
absolutely.
So that's kind of substantiated that proof of concept?
Yeah, yeah. That's a good point that you make. Yeah, that was the unbelievable thing. These were advisors that were already doing very well, highly established. They started gathering assets like crazy. Just because you can't help but notice when you have 3 or 4 IRAs and you're wondering why do you have that? Why do you have this old 401k at an old employer? Right. The clients sometimes don't think to tell you about it because it's not top of mind for them to move it or to think about, I need guidance on it. Set and forget. Right, until you actually look at it and find that they're paying 2.5% in fees, and no one's looked at it in 10 years because they set the allocation and they're in the money market. And so the problem is the clients don't always know what to ask for. So when you have credibility that you can say, hey, I know that you have 3 or 4 cluttered accounts, they don't actually work together. I tell you what, let's look at this as a package. Oh, and by the way, I noticed that your insurance and these annuities that someone sold you are out of whack. Let's fix them, or let's inspect whether they're worthy of staying on this map. And now all of a sudden we're talking about long-term care planning, and then of course we can monetize that well by doing good work. So I think what happens is that the average revenue per client increases because we're solving more problems. And that's really what it was. That's really showed the value, I think, of asset map. Permission to talk big
Yeah.
picture.
And I think the beauty of it is once you start trying to put that picture together, it starts jogging the
Mm,
family's memory so that those assets that may have been forgotten about, it brings it to the forefront because they want to make sure that they have that full picture,
yeah.
whether it's with you or not at that moment. They're going to disclose it because they want it as part of their full picture and have that open dialogue.
Yeah.
So
Well,
it's a great tool.
yeah. Thank you. Look, I was just thinking about it as I was listening to you too. I mean, it's really hard to play a strategy game when you can't see all the pieces. I mean, I don't if you've ever played Risk or Catan or any kind of the popular games of board games, you don't know where your pieces are, or we're only looking at the blue pieces and not the yellow or the red. I mean, how do you actually claim to be a big picture strategist, an advocate for their financial wellness, if you don't actually know what the board looks like? We just tend to get myopic. And of course, what gets attention is the asset management gets attention because it's interesting, and it equates really to the big conversation of net worth. And I think that's myopic.
So I want to, kind of take a little bit of a turn here and talk about lifestyle because one of the things we talk about on this show, Mitlin Money Mindset, is entrepreneurial journey, even life in general. It's not, we don't like using the term work life balance. We like using the term work-life harmony because
Yep.
balance gives you the impression that you're giving up something, and it really should be everything working together. And I in a world where ambition, you have to have ambition as an entrepreneur. You have to have drive and sacrifice. Sometimes some of that extreme, some of that family time that we all crave and desire. One interesting thing I learned about you is, you made a non-negotiable early on that you were home every day at 5:30. No matter what, you were at home with the family having dinner. And, how did that work for you? What was kind of the driver behind that for you?
I think there's a couple pieces. In the early days of building my financial planning practice, I worked till 11 midnight pretty much every night. That was I'm that mindset. I love to work. In fact, I hate being idle. And at the same time, once I had a family and there were other people involved, I knew that I wanted to be present. In fact, if you've ever heard about love languages, mine is being present. So I believe very much that the way that you express that is, and of course, I have my own history in that as a child, going as a product of a divorced family and that presence. So I really wanted to turn that one around when I became a dad, and it required a lot of I think retooling of my wiring. But what I wound up doing is basically having a calendar item that said 5:30, you need to be here, just like an appointment. It's a meeting. And I
Right.
don't want to be late, Larry. And so you can't book over it. I don't. My entire team, and in fact, I really hope that they're following this. But in both the financial planning company and Asset Map, the general edict for those 70 some parties is that you're home at 5:30. Like, we've institutionalized it. That might sound very, we'll call it old fashioned, but in a sense, it's a way to say we're going to be intentional about our time. And the way that when you build a community that thinks that way, it's actually easier to execute it because you're not in a silo. So
Right.
creating that expectation around your people and the people that report to you and supporting them to have this perception of, we'll call it work life commitment, right? We're committed wherever we are, I think is an important aspect of it. And I've been doing it ever since. And by keeping it sacrosanct, it established that those are my priorities. I don't know if you've ever heard this, but there's a classic statement that says, don't tell me what you value, show me your balance sheet, and I'll tell you what you value. I tend
Right.
to think about that more now that I'm over 50, is saying, okay, don't tell me what you value, show me your calendar and I'll tell you what you value,
Mhm.
because your time is much more valuable, I think, than your money, especially at in the second half of life.
Right. I listen. I agree with you wholeheartedly. I don't know if you're aware of this, but when my kids were first born, I started taking off during the summers. Starting in June, I would take off Fridays,
Nice.
and then it turned out I started taking off Fridays in June. Then it was Fridays in July. Then I ended up taking off Fridays all summer long. And we still have families that are with us today that were there when my kids were, very, very young, and now 20 years later,
Mhm.
that still will call in the office on a Friday. And if I pick up the phone, because now the kids are out of the house,
Yeah.
so I'm in the office. So they'll call and I didn't even think you were going to be in today. Don't you take Fridays off? They still think. And I think that, like you said, you're setting an example. I'm curious to see, how has the adoption been by, the people that work with you, your stakeholders? Is that something that you find as a leader is challenging for you to get them to kind of adhere to as well, or is it something very easily adaptable to?
Well, it's interesting because the entire company is, for the most part, the technology company of Asset Map is entirely remote. So I can't tell you whether they're working or not. I tend to be completely transparent with you and the audience here. Between 5:30 and 10, I am checked out of work. But at 10 o'clock happens when kids asleep. I tend to catch up on all the stuff that an entrepreneur would have been doing during those hours. And I've been known to go
Right.
from 10 to 2. But that's because that's my choice. Like, and I think that plenty of my staff, they see the emails coming in at 1 in the morning. They're like, "What is he doing?" But the point is that I've blocked the time, right? We cannot get
Mhm.
everything done. I don't presume everybody's going to get everything done they need to get, but everything that I must get done, I try to do in those later hours when I have no distractions. So that's how I've done it. My teams, I think, have responded pretty much well to it. I think that you lead from example, right? And when you start doing
Yeah.
it, they kind of set the expectation. I don't think I could ever go back because I don't think anybody else can now go back either. Because hopefully
Right.
they're investing their time in what really matters, which is why they work in the first place. So we can't be ignorant to say that work is more important than the life. If we're blessed enough to make that decision, right? There's obviously plenty of people that can't
Agreed.
because they're working to survive. And but ideally, if you can get past that and you can start to see the forest through the trees, I think it's important to be intentional, not just keep staying that same path and
Right.
miss life.
Yeah, I mean, I even go so far as when I'm sending those late night emails,
Mhm.
like to either families that we serve or even internally,
Yeah.
I now schedule them
Oh yeah.
so that it doesn't look like I'm working at 11 o'clock, because I don't want them to feel like compelled to reply back to me if they're. I don't want them looking, but if they did, I don't want to feel. So I'll send it at 8 a.m. or 7 a.m. the next morning so that it doesn't interrupt them. So we're totally aligned in
Yeah.
that
I've been
regard.
told to do that,
So
by the way. Sometimes I
it's
remember.
not as they don't make it as easy as it should be. You gotta go too many extra steps to do it. So,
Yeah.
if they made it easier, it would be a lot easier for everybody. But so I gotta ask you, because
Mm.
you shared, Tony Robbins. You attended a Tony Robbins weekend at the age of 16.
Yeah.
How does that happen? I mean, I know a lot of people start, following him, learning about him maybe later in
Yeah.
life. You are probably one of the few that I've ever met that have actually, followed him and attended a weekend that early on.
Well, I can't claim credit. My mom was a realtor, and she came back from the one-day program that he used to do, mastering persuasion techniques, and she came back all fired up. I'm like, "What's wrong with you?" And I was in high school. I was a rower. That was my big thing in high school. So she came back. She said, "Oh, I signed us up for this seminar." I'm like, "I don't want to go to seminar. I got race. I got races. I got practice. I'm not doing that." So she said, "Well, if you to compel me, my teenage self," she said, "Listen," she said, "the first day you actually get to walk on hot coals barefoot and not get burned." And I'm thinking, "Well, that's kind of cool." So she says, "I see all your friends that you basically didn't get burned." I'm like, "Okay, I better not get burned, but okay, so I'll go." So it was more of a challenge dare. So my
Right,
single mom took me to this experience. It was unbelievable. I'd never been in that kind of environment of just absolute hype, and also, I mean, I felt good, like positive energy and great message, and hearing things that people in 30s, 40s, and 50s were like, "I wish I learned this when I was 16." And I'm thinking, "Wow, I just didn't. I was ignorant." We wound up
right.
actually going. I think I shared with you. We wound up actually going to his full 10-day program in Hawaii, the two of us, and it was an unbelievable experience that still, and I think, sticks with me today, because what it did give me an awareness of is that, gosh, I don't know anything, right? And
Right.
as you start to learn more and more about human behavior and why we do what we do, it helps you actually navigate a lot of the challenges that we all have, and helps you navigate that for others. And I think I've definitely applied it in business and in personal life and in financial advice, that behavioral coaching of helping people make better decisions and kind of getting them on a path. So in a strange way, as you know, I think we're very much financial coaches and therapists, and that's really helped, I think, me break through a lot of stuff over the years. Not perfect, but definitely, I think, an awareness that served me.
Do you think, had it not been for that experience, that you may not be where you are today, or maybe not as quickly as you where you are today? Or, do you really feel like that had that much of an impact on your life?
Oh, I would say absolutely had an impact on my life. There's multiple fingers why, because, and I say fingers like fingers in the mess of
Yeah,
cooking, because it's obviously it takes a whole bunch of different experiences and aspects of your life to kind of, where are we today is a product of a whole bunch of things we don't even explain, can't explain. But for me, I think it was a couple things. Number one, it was confidence. It was confidence to break through fears. I did walk on hot coals. I actually have done it now over 20 times, to be honest with
and
you.
and for our listeners, have you ever burned your
No,
feet?
I've never. I think I had a small blister once, because I didn't wipe my feet off really good at the end. Um, but yeah, so I've done that. Not because I'm a thrill seeker, right? I'm not the Richard Branson, but I think uh, but I think pushing yourself each time I'm scared to death. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is, you feel the heat. But the point is that we always have fears in our lives. Like there's always things that stop us, even today, things that probably stop me from doing what I know I should do. But I think it's a reminder that those fears tend to, they're false, right?
Right.
And I think that was a big thing. Taking the entrepreneurial leap, getting into our business, which has no certainty that you're going to make it work. How many people fail out of our business? Gosh, buying real estate, making investments that have served me over the years. There's definitely, I think, the confidence side of it, and I think confidence also in financial advice is really critical. So that's what I think people are really seeking. Someone who
Hmm.
actually feels like they feel more certain that this is going to be a good outcome. So it's easier to follow them. I think that's a big role we play sometimes. And also I actually learned mind mapping, which is really the tenets of asset map, ironically,
Right.
because
Yeah.
of my art background. We got asked to take Tony's notes in the back of this. So I wound up actually staffing with my mother for many years, lots of his events, and we sat in the back. That's what our volunteer job was. We built visualizations, almost cartoon styles, of the notes, so he can look at them instantly and he could see, oh, I talked about this, and he could review his day back before everything was recorded and transcribed. So that gave me a lot of confidence to do visual representations of complicated concepts that were going to be consumable. And I got to give some credit to that, because ultimately Asset Map is an attempt to take very technical information, as you know,
Yeah.
and make it consumable.
Yeah. I think your mom was wise beyond her years at that time. Very, very much so.
She'll be
So,
happy to hear you say
uh,
that.
yeah, I applaud her for that. It's good. It's good that you've had that opportunity. One thing that I think entrepreneurs in general, right? We kind of walk away as adults in general, I should
Mhm.
say, from this whole coaching concept. When we're young and we want to refine a skill, whether it be in art, whether it be in sports, rowing, hockey, whatever that may be, we're always eager to employ a coach to help us develop and get better. Unfortunately, as we get older, we don't have that same predilection for those types of people in our lives. Now, I know you have a coach. I have a couple of coaches, and I've changed them. But you have a philosophy where you change your coach every couple of years.
Mhm.
Number one is I think entrepreneurs all should have coaches, maybe even several, depending upon what they're looking to accomplish from a personal and professional. But I think more importantly for our conversation today, I'm curious, what's your rationale behind kind of changing up that coach every few years, if you will?
Yeah, it turns out it tends to be about 3 years, and then I take a break, and then I come back. Look, it's no different than reading a book, right? Is there one book that's the best book? I mean, there's different perspectives, and sometimes the coaches are all saying the same thing. It's just sometimes how they say it, the timing that you receive it, the mindset that you're in when you're thinking about it. And of course, those coaches bring different experiences to the table. There were times when I needed startup coaching. There were times when I needed culture coaching, and I think really where my bigger pains or recognition for my areas of growth for me tended to motivate me at different times to take on different types of coaches. Operational, I tend to be really strong on the vision and communication, but that doesn't mean operationally and scaling a company that's my best skill. So I knew I needed to either outsource it or grow in those areas. And so depending upon where I was in the business side, I knew I just don't know the questions I should be asking, or I need someone to actually hold my hand. I mean, no different than our clients come to us for financial guidance. They
Right.
could read Susie Orman, I guess. They could go online and Google it, or they might want someone who actually gets to know them, understands their strengths and weaknesses, and then says, "Okay, here's the path we're going to take," based upon a very cogent approach. And that's no difference. If you believe in that model that humans can help move you faster through the evolution of growth, then you're going to be a coach mindset.
Yeah, I listen. I think that basically, you could either learn it yourself or pay for that knowledge, right? And having that coach is really paying for that knowledge and hopefully getting you there quicker, faster, and smarter when all said and done. So, thank you. I agree with you, and that abundance mindset is so important. So, Adam, it's been a pleasure having you on the show. We ask each of our guests the same last question because we are the Mitlin Money Mindset, and we're
Mhm.
all about joy on this show, and that is, what did you do today that brought you joy and put you in the right mindset for success?
So this, I was thinking about this, and I appreciate the question. I really respect what you're doing because it is so much mindset. We have to keep paying attention intentionally to it. And so one of the things that I was really excited about that I had realized today is I looked back at my calendar. Remember, I mentioned to you that that my time intentionality is really most important to me right now because
Hmm.
I'm really aware of the fact that our time is limited. And we see things happening with our older family members and recognizing that they're thinking about it. And I think it's a great important part, no matter how old you are, to say, where am I spending my time? And I looked back at my calendar and I told myself that at the beginning of the year, as my life has evolved as a different scale leader now with the company being at over 40 people, I need to spend my time on the biggest three rocks. What are the big boulders in my life? And I outlined what they were going to be at the beginning of the year. And I said, I'm going to spend 60% of my time on those things every week. And on Friday, I go back and look at my whole calendar and I color code the whole thing. And it tells me whether I did it. And I did. And actually, two shoes dropped this week specifically because I've had that effort consistently. And that was just really a great rewarding moment because sometimes we work on these big projects that are really meaningful and they just don't feel like they're moving. So for me, the joy was recognizing that the sacrifice and intentionality that I made in my calendar actually paid off. And so that was on a high today. I was high fiving a lot of the team, and we kind of look back at why that happened. So I encourage everybody
Amazing.
to pay attention to that. You can create leading indicator outcomes by being intentional in your effort.
Amazing. Thank you for sharing that. Now, we are going to have all of your information in the show notes,
Cool.
but if people want to learn more about Asset Map, learn more about Adam Holt, connect with you, what's the easiest and the best place for them to do that?
I think the best way is LinkedIn. It's really where I am present a lot on social media. So LinkedIn, H. Adam Holt. You can always follow Asset Map, find out what we're doing. But so much of our content's going out that way, and I'm having a lot of fun. We're all having a lot of fun, really talking about the next generation of conversational financial planning. So I appreciate that, Larry, and thanks so much for what you're doing. I really appreciate you, your audience, and the product you've created in Mitlin. It's fantastic. So thanks for having us.
Thanks, Adam. And we're looking forward to watching your progression and the progression of Asset Map as it continues to grow and thrive. And it'll be exciting to watch. And thank you very much for taking out the time, and enjoy your day.
Absolutely, you too.